Labor Secretary Rosalinda Baldoz achieved a major breakthrough in protecting the welfare of overseas Filipino workers, particularly domestic workers in Saudi Arabia. The signing of a bilateral agreement between the Philippines and the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, which guarantees an employment contract for all OFWs deployed in the oil-rich country. Hopefully, the Baldoz initiative will be adopted by other countries in the Middle East. And joining us tonight on NewsLife to discuss this landmark agreement is DOLE Secretary Rosalinda Baldoz. Good evening, ma'am.
Good evening, Robert, and good evening to all your listeners and followers.
Ma'am, this landmark agreement which you signed for the Philippines, how will this benefit OFWs deployed as household help in Saudi Arabia?
Tremendously, because right now we don't have a jointly agreed standard employment contract, which we succeeded in having one, and this is now an annex to the bilateral agreement that I signed. Second, this agreement is very historical in the sense that this is the first agreement that Saudi Arabia entered into and negotiated with any labor sending countries. And you are right, this could be the model or the benchmark of any labor agreement of this kind insofar as Saudi Arabia is concerned and other labor sending countries. What I know is that Indonesia is wanting or has indicated already their interest to negotiate a similar agreement, and definitely what we have signed could be a model for the rest of the labor sending countries.
Ma'am, looking at this bilateral agreement, what is specified in this? Is there a standard salary reached to be paid by Saudi employers to an OFW?
Yes, as far as the Philippines is concerned, they have accepted that we have set a minimum wage of $400 for our household service workers, and since Saudi Arabia does not have a minimum wage and it's still subject to labor market forces, then it's up for their employers who could afford to pay this minimum wage so that they can be able to hire our domestic helper.
Now, ma'am, how do we ensure that these minimum salaries will be paid to our OFWs?
Other than it is stipulated jointly in the standard employment contract that we have jointly agreed upon, there is also a provision in the agreement that Saudi Arabia will, there will be a bank account that will be open, and the salaries to be paid will be deposited in that account. So there will be a very concrete and specific evidence to prove payment of this $400. Before, we don't have this similar, this kind of arrangement with Saudi Arabia.
Ma'am, now with this agreement in place, how will this do away with the abuses of local recruiters and their Saudi partners who do not comply with the terms of employment?
First of all, our local recruitment agencies will be bound also by the agreement and also by the standard employment contract, and they will see to it that they will be providing the Saudi employers and their foreign placement agencies with highly competent domestic workers who is very much aware of the culture and tradition of Saudi, and for which no recruitment cost will be charged to them. That is expressly stated in the bilateral agreement and also in the standard employment contract.
Ma'am, aside from the salaries, what other protections are guaranteed in the bilateral agreement?
Well, salaries, then opening of the bank account, then they will now retain their passport and IQAMA or residence permits, which in the past held from them. They will also be given a rest periods for each day and also for each week, and they will be able to freely communicate to the government officials and also to their families here in the Philippines. Before, these are also not being enjoyed by them. They will now be given fair and humane treatment. There will be a facility for a 24-hour assistance for them. And what else? They will be entitled to vacation leave. If they finish a 2-year contract, their transportation expenses back here in the Philippines to their families will be paid by the employers, and if they want to rehire them, they will be given an additional 1 month's salary, and therefore the terms and conditions of employment that used to be in our standard employment contract but oftentimes violated and are not recognized by Saudi are now the subject of a jointly agreed employment contract. And the guarantee is that we will be having less and less cases of contract substitution, less and less cases of non-payment, delayed payment of salaries and abuses related to the withholding of passport, ikama, and excessive working hours.
Now, it seems very good news for OFWs who want to work in Saudi Arabia. Now, ma'am, do you expect other Middle East countries to follow the initiative of Saudi Arabia?
I would expect so. The United Arab Emirates Labor Minister discussed with me about the bilateral agreement that I intend to sign with Saudi because before I traveled to Jeddah, I had the opportunity to keynote an international conference on labor mobility, a sustainer of development in UAE, and on the side, the Minister of Labor said that after we have signed the agreement, they're going to study the agreement itself and also try to follow up on the implementation, and after that they will make a decision on whether they will also enter into an agreement. But basically, GCC countries would normally follow each other in major breakthroughs like this, where agreements are in conformity with international labor standards because agreed to the adoption of ILO Convention 189 on the basic rights and basic protection to domestic workers anywhere in the world. And so, except that Saudi Arabia went ahead and as everybody knows, already concluded an agreement with us, so the rest of the GCC countries could follow suit after they have seen how Saudi Arabia and the Philippines would be able to jointly implement this agreement.
Ma'am, is this agreement just for the domestic helpers, or will this coverage be expanded to cover construction workers and other skilled workers?
Right now, non-household service workers are covered by the national labor laws of Saudi Arabia. Before this agreement on household service workers, they are not under the jurisdiction of the Ministry of Labor. Now that we have this kind of agreement, household service workers are now part and parcel of the jurisdiction of the Labor Ministry, the same as the other non-household service worker. But Saudi Arabia, despite the coverage under the law, labor and social legislation of other workers, and the DFA has certified compliance by Saudi Arabia on this laws, the social legislation, social security, the Minister of Labor of Saudi expressed his desire to conclude another agreement to cover the rest of the categories of workers in Saudi Arabia. And as a matter of fact, towards the end of June, the last week of June, the panel or the team of Saudi Arabia will be coming over here in Manila to discuss some more procedural issues relating to the smooth implementation of the agreement on household service worker, and at the same time start the bilateral negotiation on an agreement to cover the other non-household service workers, Filipinos working in Saudi Arabia.
Ma'am, can we shift a little bit briefly and discuss a little bit about our OFWs in Taiwan? Are our workers there safe from any harm, and when do we expect deployment to resume?
We have not stopped deployment to Taiwan, and right now I think the situation has more or less normalized, and with the assurance of the Taiwan authorities that they should no longer be harassed, they should be able to concentrate on their work because they are hired mostly by multinationals engaged in the manufacturing of electronics or semiconductors, which are being exported to different countries all over the world, and therefore they are very much needed by their employers, and we have seen to it, despite pressure, that we don't deploy workers in the agriculture sector and also in the construction because of the working conditions.
Yeah.
But we allow them to work in factories, in the manufacturing sector. The proficiency of English, because all their brochure
Yeah.
are in English, is very much critical to the operations of the company, and therefore the employers would really want them to continue working, and that is what exactly has happened. Despite the incident, our workers continue to provide the services needed by these multinational firms.
Okay, ma'am, and a final word from you. It's very good that we have this historic agreement. What's next?
What's next is, as I said, for the bilateral agreement on other non-household service workers for Saudi, then that will follow suit by the end of, before the end of June. We are having bilateral negotiation with the United Arab Emirates on the non-household service worker, and hopefully the service worker or the domestic workers will follow as well. And so with Qatar, we are also negotiating a bilateral agreement with them. Pending negotiation also is our bilateral agreement with Iraq. The standard employment contract with Lebanon and Jordan is under negotiation. We have already entered into the mother agreement with Jordan and the Lebanese authorities. So we will be very busy, I think, for the rest of the year to conclude all these agreements. And these are all for the protection of our women workers, very vulnerable because of the gender and because of the nature of their jobs. And right now we are very much comfortable in saying that what we have done for our domestic helper here with the ratification by the President of ILO Convention 89 and with the passage of the law on kasambahay, which will take effect June 4, has its counterpart in our overseas employment, and therefore we are very much stable in terms of ensuring the mechanism and the adequate measure for their protection.
Okay, Dana, congratulations, ma'am, and thank you very much for joining us here at NewsLife. That was Secretary Rosalinda Baldoz of DOLE. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you so much, and God bless.